Our story has twists and turns and may be a little hard to follow, so let me tell you about the four main characters. Our story is centered about them, because this is the story of the Horner name as it relates to me. And if you have one of these Horners in your ancestral line, it relates to you also. All the others in my story help carry our theme along. But if you can keep track of the main characters, I hope the narrative will make sense for you. We begin near Sheffield, Yorkshire, which lies almost in the center of England. Two brothers appear as major characters. The younger, more adventurous, is John Forrest Horner. I think almost none of our viewers will be descended from him or have ever heard of him. But his story is interesting and intertwines with the rest of our yarn. The picture of his tombstone here will serve as his representation as we go along. His brother, Richard Alfred, is 3 years older and is the central figure in how our Horner name came to America. No actual photos of him exist, so I will repeatedly use one that depicts a man engaged in the trade he followed his whole life. Most watching this will come from his and his son Alfred Richard's line, because Alfred was married twice and had 2 sets of children. There will be a division in the line after Alfred. Howard Alfred was born of the first wife, and it is the line from whom I flow. And the other line will not carry the Horner name after the first generation, after the next generation, I should say. Not the name, but they will carry the DNA. Now, one more thing to caution you about. Of the 4 main characters I have mentioned, 3 of them have Alfred in their name. And to make things more confusing, so do I, your narrator. And one of the 4 main characters who does not have Alfred in his moniker named one of his 5 sons. Guess what? Yep, Alfred. So try to keep the Alfred straight. To make it easier in the rest of this narrative, I will refer to Richard Alfred as Richard. The picture I put with him will not be his, but a photo of a man practicing the trade he followed. I will refer to his son, Alfred Richard, as Alfred or Al. His picture will be repeated several times, for it's the only one I have. I will refer to Al's son, Howard Alfred, as Howard. His son, Kenneth, will be Ken. I will be Dick. So keep in mind, it is Richard, then Alfred. Alfred has 2 marriages. From marriage 1, it will be Howard who carries on the Horner name. And be aware of the Alfred who is John's son. I will refer to him as John's Alfred. Anyway, as you watch this, keep in mind the main characters. Brothers John and Richard, Richard's son Alfred, and finally on to Howard and his twin sisters Myrtle and Hazel, or then Alfred with his second family, wife Margaret, and daughters Eunice and Blanche. And one more potentially confusing fact I will mention again. Both John and Richard, who lived as next-door neighbors for many years, had sons they named Alfred. The 2 Alfreds were only a year apart in age. I couldn't believe it at first either, but that is the case. Trust me, Alfred Horner lived next door to his cousin Alfred Richard Horner. They were separate men with separate stories. I suspect it is the reason that sometimes in the future, our Alfred Richard is occasionally referred to as Richard A. Horner. So here we go. In the years to come after my discovery of the tombstone, rather casual research turns up the fact that Richard Alfred Horner I was born in Yorkshire, England. He married a Harriet, and they named their first surviving son Alfred Richard, reversing the father's name. Somehow or other, they turned up in Columbus, Ohio, and later found their way to Racine, Wisconsin. That's what I knew in 1976, but my life was full then. I continued immersed in family, farming, church matters. I spent time flying and on fishing and hunting trips. And to further complicate things, in 1983, I moved to Wyoming. But the wish to know this guy better was still there. And at the turn of the 21st century, I began to probe a little deeper. But it was not until very recently, as I record this in late 2012, that pieces of the puzzle really started to come together. The internet has made research incredibly easier and faster. I learned first that my great-grandfather Alfred was born in 1858 and, as mentioned earlier, in Yorkshire, England. Eventually it was found that he, at age 4, with his parents, emigrated from England to the United States in 1862. Abraham Lincoln was president, and the United States was not really united, for the Civil War was in full flower. For some reason, they went to Columbus, Ohio. His father, Richard, was 34 years old. Someone, I don't remember who, had sent me the abbreviated copy of the U.S. Census record of 1880, taken 18 years after the family arrived in the U.S. It showed that Richard, his wife Harriet, sons Alfred, 23 years old, Francis R., 7, and daughter Hattie, age 5, were living in Racine, Wisconsin. He told the census taker that his occupation was file cutter, and his 23-year-old son Alfred was a basket maker. That information satisfied me for a while, but eventually a question came to mind. Why would a 34-year-old man with a wife and 4-year-old son pack up and leave the ancestral home, make a perilous and expensive sea voyage, and move to the United States in the middle of our great Civil War? I checked some history and even discussed it with several English folks I met. I did not learn of any event in the British Isles or Northern Europe that would warrant the life-changing emigration. The only suggestion was that at that time our folks may have decided there was greater economic opportunity in the U.S. And it appears likely that was the incentive. We will learn later that the Horners were willing to relocate in search of better economic opportunities and did so on a number of occasions.